The government has today performed a huge U-turn and abandoned its plan to scrap the 45p top rate of income tax. The announcement from Chancellor Kwasi Kwarteng came just a day after the Prime Minister Liz Truss backed the policy. In a statement, Mr Kwarteng said the 45p tax plan had become a huge distraction and that the government had listened to people's concerns. But just yesterday, the Prime Minister agreed she was absolutely committed to the policy and said she would not abandon it. Those earning more than £150,000 a year would have benefited most, which a number of Conservative MPs had suggested would have been rejected when the policy came to a vote in the House of Commons. In market reaction to the U-turn, the pound jumped by more than a cent against the dollar. Government borrowing costs also fell slightly to trade at around the level they were before Mr Kwarteng's mini-budget 10 days ago. Earlier, the Chancellor spoke to the BBC.
We were focused on delivering the growth plan. There's a lot of good stuff in the growth plan. And what was clear, talking to lots of people up and down the country, talking to MPs, talking to voters, talking to our constituents, was that the 45p rate was becoming a huge distraction on what was a very strong plan. So we've got energy intervention, which is preventing bills going up to £6,500 next year. We're capping the average bill to £2,500. That's a huge saving. We've reversed the national insurance tax increase, which has again saved the average person £330 in the year. We've also brought forward the cut in the 1p, cut of 1p in the basic rate. These are strong pro-growth measures, and the 45p rate was simply a distraction on what was a good set of packages, a good set of policies, and a strong package. I've said that I take responsibility for it, and I've said that I've listened. I get the reaction. I've spoken to lots of people up and down the country. I've spoken to constituents. I've spoken to MPs and councillors and other people in our political system. But most importantly, I've listened to voters, and I'm really convinced that the best thing to do now is not to proceed with the abolition of the 45p rate.
Kwasi Kwarteng, well, this is what the Prime Minister had to say about that policy just 24 hours ago when she was interviewed by the BBC's Laura Koonsberg.
Are you absolutely committed to abolishing the 45p tax rate for the wealthiest people in the country?
Yes. And it is part, Laura, it is part of an overall package of making our tax system simpler and lower. But I think it's worth noting, in the package we announced, the vast majority of that package is the energy package.
And we've talked a lot about that, but I want to talk about this.
It's national insurance. The 45p rate actually raises very little and makes our tax system, more complicated. And we need to move away. We need to move away from the idea that everything is about how we redistribute resources. We also need to make sure we have got a tax system that's competitive internationally, and it's helping us bring in the investment, get people into work,
and you've
get
made that very
people
clear
wanting
that getting
to
the economy
get up the career ladder.
You've made that very clear. Can I ask you, Prime Minister, did you discuss scrapping the top rate with your whole cabinet?
No. No, we didn't. It was a decision that the Chancellor made.
Well, let's pick up now with our chief political correspondent, Nick Eardley, who joins us from Birmingham, where the Conservative Party conference is taking place. So Liz Truss yesterday saying that that was a decision that the Chancellor made. The Chancellor, in his interview with the BBC Breakfast team this morning, seemed to indicate that, initially at least, that the Prime Minister had made the decision on the U-turn, but then he said it was a joint decision. Either way, how does this leave them looking today, and what difference is this going to make to the rest of the conference?
Damaged, bruised. I suspect over the course of the day many people will suggest that the Prime Minister and the Chancellor have been humiliated, because those two clips you just play show just how much a difference 24 hours can make in politics. Yesterday, Liz Truss was absolutely adamant that this was the right plan and that she was sticking by that controversial decision to abolish the 45p rate of income tax. I'm told that there was a series of meetings over the course of the day where it became increasingly clear to the Prime Minister and the Chancellor in their conversations that this just wasn't going to fly. There were more and more Tory MPs coming out publicly and telling the world what many had been saying privately, that they didn't support this, that they thought it showed that the government had got its priorities wrong. There were an increasing number of people, including the former Cabinet Minister Grant Shapps, saying, look, we're just not convinced that this plan's going to get through Parliament. And so over the course of the day, Liz Truss and Kwasi Kwarteng basically decided this is an unwinnable fight. We saw that story appear from The Sun overnight, saying that this plan was going to be junked. And as you just heard, the Chancellor confirmed it all on the television this morning. A colossal U-turn, and one that leaves a government that's only been in office for a month in a pretty precarious place. I think actually, Anita, we can hear from Grant Shapps. He was one of the people who said yesterday that this plan wasn't a good idea, that it showed the government had got its priorities wrong. He was one of the people predicting that ministers could lose the vote in Parliament. Here's what he told BBC Breakfast.
I'd spoken to the Chancellor and I'd spoken to the Prime Minister over the weekend and said that actually, knocking on doors, it was very, very clear that this 45p issue was actually crowding out all the other good stuff, like that massive energy cap, which is designed to help millions of people. I was talking to people on the doorstep who were simply saying, look, I'm going to have to take on a second job. I'm going to have to work extra shifts. I'm so concerned about my mortgage. And my understanding now is that the money you're borrowing as a government to fund tax cuts for the people who are the wealthiest is one of the reasons why these mortgage rates are going up. And so it's very, very important they acted to sever that link. And that's what they're doing this morning. And I strongly welcome that.
It was interesting, Nick, to hear the Chancellor's language this morning. He repeatedly called the row, the controversy over the decision in the budget to cut the top rate a distraction. He said it had become a distraction. He used that word multiple times. And I wonder then, when you look at his reaction, his response to the question of whether the government would link benefits to inflation, something which Rishi Sunak had said he would do, the Chancellor didn't give a direct answer to that. So I wonder, is that a mistake, do you think? Will that be seen as a mistake by the party as well as the wider public?
Yeah, look, I think that the real discomfort in the Conservative Party over the past few days has been the idea that there was a political narrative setting in, that the Conservative government was giving tax cuts to people earning over £150,000 a year, was allowing bankers to have bigger bonuses, but at the same time was saying we're not guaranteeing that we're going to put benefits up at the same rate of inflation, which would mean a real terms benefits cut for people on universal credit. And there were a great number of Conservatives I've spoken to who thought basically that was totally the wrong message, that it showed that the government had lost track of what it was trying to achieve, and that politically it was pretty much impossible to sell. So I think that's where the government ended up last night, quite frankly. It knew that it was going to face a challenge to get this through Parliament. It knew that its plans were deeply unpopular with Tory MPs who were prepared to speak out. And finally, it kind of got the impression that it had lost this debate. And politically, if it didn't change its mind now, the damage, although it's considerable this morning, would have been even greater.
OK, Nick, thank you very much. Nick Eardley there, our chief political correspondent in Birmingham.